A word of warning tends to great advantage when issued reverently from the lips of the estimable. It serves to allay the danger pending on reticence, and substantiate in a measure the confidence which has hitherto existed between the parties concerned. Again, judicious advice extended to the stubborn and self-willed proves futile, and incurs the further malice and fiery indignation of the regardless, the reckless, and the uncharitable. Lady Dunfern began now to grow both cross and careless, and seemed not to interest herself so much, since her propositions were so emphatically denounced by her husband concerning the management of the household staff. She grew daily more retired, and often has her conduct been so preposterously strange as to cause alarm both to Sir John and all over whom he had immediate control. Indeed, 3 months of married life scarcely elapsed until she cast a glow of despair within the breast which too often heaved for her with true piety and love. And what was meant by such strange conduct on her part, her husband often wondered. Only the mighty cessation of friendship caused by the flight of her beloved guardians, never attributing such silence and stubbornness to any fault he justly committed. Yes, the duped husband, when being fished for with the rod of seeming simplicity and concealed character, and quickly caught on the hook of ingenuity with deception for a bait, was altogether unable to fathom its shallowest meaning. Was he not, therefore, to be sympathized with, who so charitably extended the hand of honor and adoration to the offspring of unknown parents, and placed her in position equal to any lady of title and boasted parentage within the boundary of County Kent? Should Sir John Dunfern not have been almost worshipped by a wife whose binding duty it was to reverence her husband in all things pertaining to good? No doubt this would have been so, had he gained the affections he imagined he possessed, but later on he would inevitably be made aware of matters which as yet only bordered on supposition. Day after day Lady Dunfern pined like a prisoner in her boudoir, and scarcely ever shared a word with the great and good Sir John, who many times wished in former days that she had occupied his home and all its joys. She formed an inward resolution that if prohibited from enjoying life to which she was accustomed at Dilworth Castle, she would make her husband, whom she knew too well made her his idol, feel the smart, by keeping herself aloof from his caresses as much as possible. Often would he be found half asleep in deep thought, not having any friend of immediate intimacy in whom he could confide or trust, or to whom he could unbosom the conduct of his wife, whose actions now he was beginning to detest. The thoughts of disappointment and shame were building for themselves a home of shelter within him, disappointment on account of cherished hopes, which unmistakably were crushed to atoms beneath the feet of her who was the sole instigation of their origin. Shame in all probability, lest the love he sought and bought with the price of self might not be his after all, and may still be reserved against his right and kept for another much less worthy. The little jealous spark again revived and prompted him to renew its lustre, which had been hidden for a length of time behind the cloud of dread so silently awaiting the liberty of covering the hill of happiness. Quietly ruminating over his wife's manner before marriage, about which he was compelled, through observation, to demand an explanation, and pondering carefully her strange and silent habits since it, he became resolved to probe the wound that had swollen so enormously as to demand immediate relief. Ringing furiously for a maid, he handed her a note to be delivered without delay to Lady Dunfern, the nature of which might well be suspected. Be that as it may, its contents were instrumental in demanding immediate attention. Soon after its delivery, a slight tap was heard at the door of Sir John's study, this room being always his favourite haunt, where he sat beside a bright and glowing fire, engaged in sullen thought, and with an imperious "Come in!" he still remained in the same thinking posture, nor was he aware for fully 5 minutes or so that his intruder was no other than she whom he so recently ordered into his presence. Gazing up in a manner which startled the cold-hearted woman not a little, he requested her to have a seat right opposite his, to which she instantly complied. At this moment the snow was wafting its flaky handfuls thickly against the barred enclosures of Dunfern Mansion, and chilly as nature appeared outside, it was similarly so indoors for the fond and far-famed husband of Lord Dilworth's charge. Matters had appeared so unpleasant and altogether bewildering of late that Sir John formed a resolution to bring them to a crisis. Looking fully into the face that seemed so lovely just now, with the dainty spots of blazing ire enlivening the pale cheeks of creeping sin, Sir John began, "Irene, if I may use such familiarity, I have summoned you hither. It may be to undergo a stricter examination than your present condition probably permits, but knowing, as you should, my life must be miserable under this growing cloud of unfathomed dislike, I became resolved to end, if within my power, such contentious and unladylike conduct as that practised by you towards me of late. It is now quite 6 months, yea, weary months, since I shielded you from open penury and insult, which were bound to follow you, as well as your much-loved protectors, who sheltered you from the pangs of penniless orphanage. And during these 6 months, which naturally should have been the pet period of nuptial harmony, it has proved the hideous period of howling dislike. I, as you see, am tinged with slightly snowy tufts, the result of stifled sorrow and care concerning you alone. And on the memorable day of our alliance, as you are well aware, the black and glossy locks of glistening glory crowned my brow. There dwelled then, just 6 months this day, no trace of sorrow or smothered woe, no variety of colour, where it is and shall be so long as I exist. No furrows of grief could then be traced upon my visage. But, alas, now I feel so changed. And why? Because I have dastardly and doggedly been made a tool of treason in the hands of the traitoress and unworthy. I was enticed to believe that an angel was always hovering around my footsteps when moodily engaged in resolving to acquaint you of my great love, and undying desire to place you upon the highest pinnacle possible praise and purity within my power to bestow. I was led to believe that your unbounded joy and happiness were never at such a par as when sharing them with me. Was I falsely informed of your ways and worth? Was I duped to ascend the ladder of liberty, the hill of harmony, the tree of triumph, and the rock of regard? And when wildly manifesting my act of ascension, was I to be informed of treading still in the valley of defeat? Am I, who for nearly 40 years was idolized by a mother of untainted and great Christian bearing, to be treated now like a slave? Why and for what am I thus dealt with? Am I to foster the opinion that you treat me thus on account of not sharing so fully in your confidence as it may be another? Or can it be, imaginative that you have reluctantly only shared with me that which I have bought and paid for fully? Can it be that your attention has ever been or is still attracted by another, who by some artifice or other had the audacity to steal your desire for me and hide it beneath his pillaged pillar of poverty, there to conceal it till demanded with my ransom? Speak, Irene, wife, woman! Do not sit in silence and allow the blood that now boils in my veins to ooze through cavities of unrestrained passion and trickle down to drench me with its crimson hue. Speak, I implore you, for my sake, and act no more the deceitful Duchess of Nantes, who, when taken to task by the great Napoleon for refusing to dance with him at a state ball, replied, "You honored me too highly, acting the hypocrite to his very face. Are you doing likewise?" Here Sir John, whose flushed face, swollen temples, and fiery looks were the image of indignation, restlessly awaited her reply. Lady Dunfern began now to stare her position fully in the face. On this interview, she thought, largely depended her future welfare, if viewed properly. Should she make her husband cognizant of her inward feelings, matters were sure to end very unsatisfactorily. These she kept barred against his entrance in the past, and she was fully determined should remain so now until forced from their home of refuge by spirited action. Let it be thoroughly understood that Lady Dunfern was forced into a union she never honestly countenanced. She was almost compelled, through the glittering polished Lady Dilworth put on matters, to silently resign the hand of one whose adoration was amply returned, and enter into a contract which she could never properly complete. All she could do now was to plunge herself into the lake of evasion and answer him as best she could. "Sir and husband," she said with great nervousness at first, "you have summoned me hither to lash your rebuke unmercifully upon me, provoked it may be by underhand intercourse.
Intercourse.
You accordingly, in the course of your remarks, fail not to temper with a character which as yet defies your scathing criticism. Only this week have I been made the recipient of news concerning my deceased parents, of whom I never before obtained the slightest clue, and armed with equality, I am in a position fit to treat some of your stingy remarks with the scorn they merit. You may not already be aware of the fact that I, whom you insinuate you wrested from beggary, am the only child of the late Colonel Iddesleigh, who fell a victim to a gunshot wound inflicted by the hand of his wife, who had fallen into the pit of intemperance. Yes, Earl Payton's daughter was his wife, and my mother, and only that this vice so actuated her movements, I might still have lent to society the object it dare not now claim, and thereby would have shunned the iron rule of being bound down to exist for months at a time within such a small space of the world's great bed. If my manner have changed in any way since our union, of it I am not aware, and fail to be persuaded of any existing difference, only what might be attributed to Lady Dilworth's sudden and unexpected removal from our midst, which occasioned me grief indeed. It behooves elderly men like you to rule their wives with jealous supervision, especially if the latter tread on the fields of youth. Such is often fictitious and unfounded altogether, and should be treated with marked silence. I may here say I was mistress in a measure of my movements, whilst under the meek rule of Lady Dilworth, nor was I ever thwarted in any way from acting throughout her entire household as I best thought fit, and since I have taken upon me to hold the reins of similarity within these walls, I find they are much more difficult to manage. I more than once have given orders which were completely prohibited from being executed. By whom, might I ask, and why? Taking everything into consideration, I am quite justified in acquainting you that, instead of being the oppressor, I feel I am the oppressed. Relative to my affections, pray have those courted by me in the past aught to do with the present existing state of affairs? I am fully persuaded to answer nothing whatever. You speak of your snowy tufts appearing where once there dwelt locks of glossy jet. Well, I am convinced they never originated through me, and must surely have been threatening to appear before taking the step which links me with their origin. I now wish to retire, feeling greatly fatigued, and trusting our relation shall remain friendly and mutual. I bid thee good night.
Lady Dunfern swept out of the room and, hurrying to her own apartment, burst into an uncontrollable fit of grief. She had surely been awaked from her reverie by Sir John, and felt sharply the sting of his remarks, which were truly applied indeed. She now resolved to let matters move along as quietly as possible until after she should pass the most critical period of her existence. She was prepared to manifest her innocence throughout, without detection if possible. But amongst the household there moved a matron under whose hawk-like eye Lady Dunfern was almost inclined to shrink. She felt when in her presence to be facing an enemy of unbounded experience. She abhorred her stealing tread, but not without cause. It was to this dame she so often issued orders that never were carried out, and when intimating to Sir John the necessity of instantly dismissing such a tyrant, he quietly rebelled, adding that she had been almost 20 years in his service, and presently could not think of parting with such a valued and much trusted friend. This woman's name was Rachel Hyde, and proved the secret channel of intercourse between Sir John and Lady Dunfern, evidently paving the way for her ladyship's downfall. As Rachel, being mistress for such a period over Dunfern Manor, could never step the fence leading to abolition of power, which she so unwillingly tried to mount since Sir John's marriage, and failing totally in her attempt, was lifted and thrown over by her mistress, an act she could never forget, and consequently carried all news, trivial or serious, concerning Lady Dunfern to her master, and delivered it in such an exaggerated form as to incur his wrath, which already had been slightly heated. A few months elapsed again, during which time matters went on much as usual, until an event happened that should have chased the darkest cloud of doubt and infidelity from the noble brow of the mighty and revered master of Dunfern Mansion.
A huge thank you to all of my generous and incredible Patreon supporters, particularly Andre D., Break System BSE, Michael Fattori, Zachary Snowden-Smith, and Xana Zira. Thank you for watching, and thanks for being you.